All right, so this sequence is to help free up the legs in the hip sockets, so where the femurs meet the pelvis. And I pulled out this model of the pelvis and spine so that when I mention certain landmarks, you'll have a better idea of what I'm referring to. So this whole area we're going to call the pelvis. These are the ends of the leg bones under the ends of the femur that come into the hip sockets on either side of the pelvis. And so it's this motion, this turning, rotation in the hip socket that we are working on today. So femur coming into the pelvis of the hip socket. Here at the front of the pelvis, where the two pelvic halves meet, is the pubic bone. And at the back of the pelvis, you can see this, right at the base of the spine is this big triangular bone. That's the sacrum. And even though it is part of the spine, it's also kind of considered part of the pelvis. It's the back of the pelvis. Right at the very bottom of the sacrum is the tailbone. So when I say tip the tailbone up, right, turn the tailbone up, the movement I'm talking about is this anterior tilt of the pelvis, turning up, hard to do this with the model, and then tucking the tailbone under is scooping the pelvis under this way. So I hope that you'll get a better idea of this once we're on the Gertie Ball. So come onto your back with the Gertie Ball at hand. Bending the knees, bringing the feet flat to the floor. We're going to put the ball right behind the back of the pelvis, where the sacrum is, right in the center of the sacrum. So not in the low back, a little bit lower than the low back. Okay, so that the whole weight of the pelvis is supported by the ball. We'll just take a moment here to let the body settle into this posture, feeling the feet on the ground. Let the head drop, shoulders relax. And after a few moments, you might begin to feel the belly also begin to drop back. The low belly dropping back into the pelvis. You want to have this sense of resting down, resting back. And we're going to start with some movements here of the pelvis over the ball. I'd like you to keep the weight of your pelvis still on the ball, so you don't have to make any effort to lift the pelvis up and off the ball. It's still resting down. We're just going to let the ball help guide the movement. The first movement is a posterior tilt, which means tucking the pelvis under. And to do that, I'm going to turn my tailbone up towards the ceiling, and it'll feel like my low back is dropping towards the floor. Sort of scooping the pelvis under, the tailbone is reaching towards the ceiling, and the front body is contracting, shortening. And then I'm going to come into the anterior tilt, which is the other direction. The pelvis is going to roll the other way, the tailbone turning towards the floor. It'll feel like your low back is arching away from the ground. And the belly is stretching a little. Okay? And we're going to go back and forth between those two movements, tucking the pelvis under. Let's exhale as we do that. And then turning the pelvis forward. Inhaling. Exhaling, tucking under. Inhaling forward. Exhaling, tucking under. Feel like the belly contracting in towards the spine, shortening the front. Inhaling, lengthening the front body as the pelvis tips forward. And let's do a few more of these, letting the movement initiated from the tailbone. So I'm going to be dropping or turning the tailbone down, tip the pelvis forward, arching the back, drawing the tailbone up, pelvis under, dropping the back of the body. Finding the rhythm of your movement synchronized with your breath. And then we're going to come back to rest here. Just let everything come back to center. And keeping the shoulders and head relaxed, lifting your feet off the floor, bringing the knees and the inner edges of the feet together. And just balance there. You'll find that a bit of subtle work here in core muscles to keep your pelvis just perched on top of the ball there. Then we're going to find an inhalation, and as you breathe in, stretch one leg long and away from you, flex the feet, and then exhale and bring that leg back in. Inhale, other leg, which is long towards the bottom of your mat. Keep that leg floating off the floor. And then exhale, bring it back in. Alternating one leg at a time. Inhale, the leg out. Exhale, bring the leg in. All this time, finding the subtle balancing happening. When I say subtle, I mean some of the deeper core muscles engage here, find our center on the ball. If we're doing one leg at a time, feels really sort of not so interesting, maybe not so challenging. It's good to stay here and maybe just more repetition. Other option to both legs at the same time, bringing the inner lines of the legs together, a little fish tail reaching out and drawing back in. And you can inhale as both legs reach out long, flex the feet, press out through the heels, spread the toes, exhale and draw the legs in. Notice the neck, jaw, shoulders are tightening, so you want to keep upper body, upper torso relaxed, letting the hip flexors, the quads, abdominal muscles working. Okay, and after you've done, maybe 5, 10 of those, coming back and releasing your feet onto the floor. And then we're going to come into another movement here on the ball. So let's take just a little bit wider than the hip. And this movement, rather than going into a tucking under or tipping forward, we're going to turn the pelvis to one side. You're going to roll across the width of the ball so that your pelvis and your belly begins to turn to one side. And then you come back to center and go in the other direction, turning the pelvis the other direction. You'll feel one hip will be lifting higher than the opposite hip. So side to side, and you'll see, I don't know if you can see this, but my knees are mostly going to be pointing up towards the ceiling, not allowing my knees to sway side to side with the pelvis. I'm rotating the pelvis while the knees stay looking up towards. Okay, very nice. Let's come back to center. Press the feet into the floor. Lift your pelvis right up off the ball now. The ball out from underneath you. Pause there, holding this posture for a few breaths. Bridge pose. The pelvis is level, so not allowing one to drop lower than the other. Thigh bone, the thighs reaching long and away from you. Shoulders and head stay heavy on the ground. Work to strengthen the muscles of the back bodies, of the buttocks, hamstrings. And then finding a breath and slowly lowering back down, this time the pelvis coming all the way down to the floor. Noticing that contact of the sacrum on the ground now, and then drawing both knees towards your chest. Wrap your arms around the shin or around the back of the thighs, coming into a little boat pose. Keeping the head heavy, shoulders down. As you exhale, the breath goes out. We're going to hug the thighs in towards the rib cage. As the breath comes in, let the thighs move away. So it's exhaling, hugging the thighs in towards you. Inhaling, and the thighs away. And as you do this, you might feel the pelvis also rocking on the ground, no longer on the ball, right? But as the thighs continue towards you, the tailbone lifts a little towards the ceiling and the low back presses to the floor. And as the thighs come away from you, the pelvis tips forward, the tailbone drops, gain a little curve in your low back. So a couple more of these. This can give a nice stretch to the low back area. And then let's release and bring the feet down to the floor. We're going to next come up onto our feet. And to come onto our feet from here, roll onto your side, right over onto your side. Plant your hands on the floor. And then shift yourself onto your knees and hands. Middle position. Tuck the toes under. Walk the hands back towards the knees. As you do this, the knees will begin to lift. Yeah? And then slowly shifting your weight back into the legs and the feet until all the weight is the legs and the feet. And then press yourself all the way up to standing. So coming up onto your feet, and we're going to do a few standing forward bends. And I'd like to use a chair or a stool. Could be a little higher if you need it, so maybe the surface of the desk. And we're going to practice now holding forward at the hip joint. Come down, place our hands on the chair, right? So this movement of the pelvis is like the anterior tilt that we did on the ball, where the tailbone here is lifting up towards the ceiling, and we are revolving the pelvis joint forward, hands on the chair. This is very different. That hinging in the hips is very different than coming down into a forward bend spine. Now, when I come forward through my spine, there's a lot of rounding in here. I'm stretching the back body, compressing the front, and the hips aren't really going anywhere, as opposed to folding forward at the hip joint. My spine's nice and long, straight as I bring my hands to the chair. There's no loading on my disc, no loading on my spine. The weight is still very much in my pelvis and in my leg. So coming into mountain pose, bringing your feet so that they're parallel and underneath your hips, and reaching down into the ground through the four corners of the feet, mounds of the big toes, baby toes, inner heels, outer heels. And as the legs reach down into the four corners of the feet, the spine lifts up, reaching the chest up, lengthening a little bit up through the back of the head as well. Opening your palms so that they're looking forward. On an inhale, we're going to sweep the arms up and overhead. And then exhale, arms reaching out to the sides like wings. And there's the folding forward, hinging at the hip sockets as we come down and bring our hands onto the chair. Pause here. And then on an inhalation, press down through the feet, arms reach out to the sides like wings, drawing us all the way back up. And then palms together overhead, exhale, palms in front of the heart. Inhale, reach the arms up. Exhale, arms reach out to the sides, forward at the hips, keeping the spine long. Palms come to the chair. When you're here in standing table pose, watch your shoulders. They're going to want to creep up towards your ear. We're going to ask the shoulders to draw back and away from the ears, broadening the collarbone so that the neck stays nice, long, and free. And there's room there for your head, for your breath, for your lungs. Inhale, arms reach out to the sides, drawing all the way up, palms together. Exhale, palms apart. One more time. Inhale, reach up, exhale, fold forward. Stay rooted through the four corners of the feet. Inhale, we reach up, palms together. Exhale, palms apart. Okay, final piece we're going to do. You could use a chair for this or have your legs up a wall. I'm going to demonstrate this with the chair. Come onto my back and sweep the legs up onto the chair. And then rest back. So I want to have a sense of my spine getting nice and long and kind of perpendicular to the wall or the chair, meaning you haven't sort of come into a crooked place. So you might just have a look down your spine and make sure you're coming out of the wall or out from your chair in a nice sort of perpendicular or 90-degree angle. So here we're going to stretch the buttock muscle as well as get into the hip rotators. So you're going to take your right ankle over the left thigh. Flex your feet. Feel the back of your pelvis staying on the ground, so we're not lifting it up off the ground, down. And on an exhalation, we're going to encourage this right thigh to press towards the chair. Press towards the chair. This is external rotation of that right thigh. And as you inhale, you can relax a little bit. And then exhale, it's on the out breath, really actively turning that thigh away from the midline. If you can do this without using your arms, it's not like pushing that leg away, it's more using your musculature, strength here of that hip. Turn that leg away. Now, you might also be feeling the stretch in the back of the right hip, in the buttock. If not, you could slide that leg a little closer towards you. When I say that leg, I mean the left one. Sliding off the chair or if you're at the wall, right? You could slide the heel down the wall a little bit, or you could take hold of the back of the left thigh. So the closer you get the left thigh, the more of a stretch you're going to get in the back of that right hip. It might be for you a better choice just to stay here without trying to draw the legs any closer. Paying attention to how the sensation is for you in your hip, buttock, in your knees, and know it's better to back off than to force through the stretch and into pain, out of the region of pain. So there's side A. When you're finished here, just release that leg back to the chair. And for the sake of just keeping this video a little shorter, I won't go through the whole other side, but would do side B next. Left ankle crossing over the right. Once you've done both sides, you could rest here and breathe. Practice breathing through the nose, keeping the mouth closed, inhaling, exhaling through the nose, and continuing to let the pelvis relax to the ground, shoulders resting back. A nice, conscious, nourishing breath. For the mind, the heart. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope that was helpful.